Mm.
Hi,
Hi
Rafile.
everyone. Hi everyone, and welcome to what's promised to be quite an incredible session today. As part of our initiative to constantly engage with our community of the visual arts sector, we've been asking different folks to come on board and curate various talks. This one has been curated by Balisa Mutsumi, who's also facilitating this discussion and will introduce the other panelists. But welcome everybody who's here. My name is Rufilo Nkomo. I'm the director of VANZA. For those who don't know, but I hope you do know, VANZA operates as a support point and development agency for contemporary art practice in South Africa. We develop industry knowledge, resources, networks, and projects that are concerned with realizing new social, cultural, and economic possibilities for contemporary art practice in South Africa and the wider African context. So just a quick note on how this will work. For those in the Zoom call, your microphones are muted and only those who the presenters' cameras will be on. Everybody else's cameras will be off. We're also streaming on Facebook. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask or just comments that you'd like to engage with the participants and the panelists, please do feel free to ask those and we will direct our panelists and facilitator to those questions. So without further ado, I will pass over to Balisa to direct us in this talk titled Serving Us Bread. Thanks so much, Balisa.
Thanks, Rafile, and thank you for the people that have joined us for today. I hope that we will be able to come out with productive ways of working together outside of the lockdown, as well as making sure that we collaborate with one another during this time, more so than we've ever done in the past. Without further ado, my name is Balisa Mutsumi. I am the founder of Simatsatsa Library, and I've been in operations for the past 5 to 6 years. I started in the industry at the Great Mo Studios and slowly built my way into independence and entrepreneurship. And at the moment, I think this is a pivotal conversation to have with the 3 panelists that are joining us today. And I just want to introduce them quickly. We have Sarah Hallett. Sarah has been working in the visual arts sector for almost 10 years. She's currently the director of the Meta Foundation and also one of the people that were also heading up Back Factory Artist Studios a few years ago. The next person we have on the panel is Nontsokolo Mlochana. Nontsokolo is the founder and managing director of Raw Foundation, NPC, which seeks to enable information resources and develop programs in the Free State. The third person we have in the panel today is Brooklyn J. Pagati, and he is the new media. He is a new media artist and independent curator. He explores the relationships we manifest with technologies, digital interactions with artists, and research, and is a researcher. I would like to also start and thank one of the people that were part of this conversation in the very beginning, Scott E. Williams. He could not make it with us today, but we send all our blessings and love to him at this moment. I'd also like to engage with you through the chat box, and if anybody has any questions, please do drop us a line in the chat box. As much as we would like to have this conversation as the 4 of us, I think it's also important to have people contribute in various ways. And for those that are also on Facebook, please do engage with us on the social media platforms. Without further ado, everyone, I think let's just get into it and ask one pivotal question around how has it been under lockdown for some of the panelists here. And I'd like to start with probably alphabetically for now. Brooklyn, please engage with us and let us know, how has it been for you during this time, the past 5 months?
Hey, before I start, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be a part of all of this. I'm really glad that I get to engage with all of you about some of the things that we've been doing at Tomorrow, but also personally. And I'm just really excited to share for the next hour or so. I think like the last 5 months, 6 months have been really quite difficult initially for me, but also for Tomorrow, this space, because we deal with a lot of interactivity and engagement, physical engagement within the art space. What I mean by that is we work with a lot of new media and technology that allows and kind of beckons for engagement. So what that looks like is someone coming to our space, putting on a VR headset, using a device to look at work, look at the works that are created through technology. And because of C19, that's then put a limit on how we can then make work and how we go forward, because we want people to be physically present within a space and touching things. How do you then kind of mitigate and create a new approach for that? So it's been a time in which I've had to think really fast on my feet and thinking about how we then re-engage and reappropriate the work that we're making with artists and for artists in a space that's virtual. It's not the most difficult thing for us, but it has been hard in the sense that we've had to reshape our whole exhibition model, our whole kind of mandate when we're creating art. But we've been able to explore and find new ways of doing that. So yeah, it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, it's been extremely difficult, but on the other hand, it's also been a really nice way to be more intimate with artists and creators, and kind of this collective loneliness that we're going through. It's a nice way for us to just connect much more deeper than what we would do in person, potentially. I
Thank
think
you
you're.
so much, Brooklyn. I love how you have excellently put it and said this collective loneliness, because I think everybody can feel that we also experiencing something really dynamic in terms of shifting the way we operate in the arts. I'd like to move on to ask Sarah, in terms of working within Meta Foundation and how the August House has fared during this time. Sarah?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, look, there are like 45 artists at August House, and different people have fared differently. What we found is that people who are more established, I guess, and potentially had exhibitions outside of the country, whether that was physical or online, have managed to claw their way back to some kind of sense of normality. The tragedy is, I think, that for a lot of our emerging artists, it's been incredibly difficult. We all know it's incredibly difficult for them at the best of times, but then throw in cancellations of events, and it becomes so much harder. We've also, we've tried to kind of engage a little bit in the online space, but I guess there's becoming a little bit of fatigue in that space. So some of the artists have said things to me like, Turbine hasn't been as successful for them as they anticipated. Latitudes has obviously changed its whole business model. So some of the kind of annual events that people might rely on to sustain their careers have disappeared or changed. But people, maybe like the first 2 months, the studio was very quiet during the kind of hard lockdown phase. But after that, people have been in their studios and working. And I think certainly from a government point of view, there was this kind of lack of realization. Studio spaces meant an artist working by themselves in a room. And people have gotten cracking making work because they can't sit still for too long, So right now the studio is humming. But it is hard times economically ahead for everyone.
Absolutely. I think you've touched on so many key points in terms of studio space and what that means for artists at the moment, as well as what it means to work collectively outside of, stage 2, right? Because we started in stage 5, got to stage 4. Now we transitioned to stage 3, where everybody thought that, we're going to go back to another stage of lockdown. And now we have now landed in stage 2, which makes everything open up, right? Just before we actually have the economy fully open in terms of international travel. And I'm wondering, moving on to Nontsokolo, to find out how is the local economy, the local ecosystem within Bloemfontein and within the surrounding areas in that capacity. How has it been for you as somebody who's worked with local artists on a cellular level, and also just realizing how important it is for them to actually work together and form new relationships? I'm going to take it over to you, Nontsokolo. Nontsokolo, are you there?
You're on mute.
Oh, she's on mute.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Palesa, for this opportunity. For me, I don't want to lie. For us, in fact, community artists, that's how we refer ourselves as. It has been very difficult. I don't want to lie. It has been very difficult trying to figure out what is it that we need to do now, because we thrived on a physical experience, festivals, and some of the artists would perform on the streets and so on. So having to relook at how we do things, it was one of the most difficult things, still is now, because most of the artists do not have access to internet. They don't have access to, mobile phones. But yeah, the thing is, we can't just sit and not do anything. The show must go on. Something must happen. There must be bread on the table. So we've, as a Raw Foundation, we've came up with an idea to have a digital festival, but we didn't know how to do it. Also, we're just like, okay, what do we need to do? We need to be online. What does it take to be online? And then we learned all those things as we go. And this is when now the National Arts Council also came in party to say that we can be able to assist you guys in this thing, so that you can create more jobs for more artists. And it has been really nice, because they have also been so, accepting of our foundation, to say that we support you guys, we want to collaborate with you. So it has been that we have been having, because we realized that if we don't stick together now, we might just not even make it tomorrow. So we we created a space where we can be able to collaborate with each other, and not just in the community here in the Free State. We've also, reached out to other provinces. We've reached out to other communities outside the continent. And we have received a lot of support in terms of collaboration. We actually have just made a collaboration with the Binje Festival, which is in Kenya, and we are 6 different African countries. So that's like huge for us, coming from a small community, township. It's huge for us, but our struggle is still the same, Sis Palesa and everyone. It's that a lot of artists can't get online, and we are creating the space for them. If they can't get online, what is the space for? So yeah, those are some of our challenges, and those are some of we are trying, but eventually we will win, even though, yeah, we're still having difficulties in terms of being able to secure data for them also, because you can't just invite them and expect them to have data. They don't have it. You have to find a way. And still, when you invite them, you need to pay them something so that they can also put bread on the table. But our mission as the foundation has been, we want to pay for content. We want artists to keep working, whether it needs to be for us to be on the ground and following the rules and having our mask on and pre-recording their material. That is exactly what we are going to do.
Wow, thank you so much, Nontsokolo. I've learned so much with your input. It's definitely a time to really reshape how we think about the arts, and also just looking at how we can also reach for each other's notion of creativity. So I'm really interested to hear more later on in the discussion. For me, I think personally, just to share a little bit about my experience, I took a break last year due to my own study goals. But I think one of the key areas that I had always been interested in, one that really played a role in my own indoctrination when it comes to artists and creativity, was that we needed to find a model of, another model of collaborating, another way of looking at things, even before COVID-19. I think that in most cases, we tend to find ways of collaborating, but not having a framework as to how we do that. And one of the things that I've been really trying to investigate through my work is trying to find strategies and ways of being together as a community, and also imparting some kind of knowledge, and also making sure that we know how to operate our businesses within the arts. So that's basically what I've been trying to look at before COVID-19, but also just having the struggles that anybody can have within the arts as an independent arts person. But I think one of the things that I like with this discussion is that we're discussing a relevant issue on putting bread on the table, which Nontsokolo has really reiterated so beautifully. I'm wondering also, what kind of business models do we employ during this time once we get out of this lockdown and transition into different spaces and different thoughts around space, and how that relates to our well-being and also our growth in the industry. So I'd like to also ask the panel, as we transition out of the lockdown, what are some of the business models that you see will actually take form, or that you're already taking part in as we speak? I'd like to start with Sarah, if you'd like to unmute your mic, please.
Thanks. Look, I think that lockdown or COVID, the pandemic, has revealed many flaws. Maybe some of them will still be there at the end of it all, because it is a very particular and niche industry. But I think things like data and internet, whatever, like we should be at a point in this country where that's not a thing anymore, but it is. And I guess that some of the things we've been asking government for maybe have been, we've left out some of these things because we haven't really thought about it, or we haven't needed them as much. So I guess that there'll be should be a kind of slight shifting in some of the priorities to bring everyone up to a certain level where, at least, if nothing else, you can participate in projects because you have access to fiber or data or whatever the thing is. In terms of kind of coming out of lockdown, I've always been a believer that collaboration is the only way to do anything. I think that the NGO world and the arts world specifically is one of the harder places to work in. And you're always trying to do everything by yourself because we never have any resources to pay for enough staff, and we can never pay people properly. So, unlike big corporates that can attract all these amazing people, we're not always in that position to do that. So the only way it makes sense for me is to do it together. And what I've kind of opted to do in the last couple of months is really try and use this time as a planning time and a brainstorming time. And I've looked at all the projects that I'm interested in doing as both August House and the Meta Foundation. And I've essentially reached out to people who I know are working in those spaces. And I've gone to them and said, I've got this idea, like, do you want to do something with me, kind of vibe. Always the problem ultimately comes down to funding, because big dreams often require at least some money for people to be involved. So, I mean, there's definitely, I think we need to become better as business people at looking at kind of shared income stream models, or diversifying our portfolios of how we raise funds, because you can't always rely on government or one partner. They may change their minds and no longer want to work with you. So I've spent some time trying to work that out, like how can we diversify ourselves so that we've got a number of different things working, and that some of those bring in return income that's pretty stable and obvious, and that allows me to be more risky with other things, kind of stealing from Peter to pay Paul to do projects, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I mean, that's been our big focus. There are always the normal ways of making money in the arts, and those are projects and selling work. Like, that's what or events, you can maybe charge a ticket entrance to a fair. But I don't think there's a huge, as much as we can like reinvent the wheel, I don't think there's a huge amount of reinvention one can do, because on some level it kind of is what it is. So maybe it's about us becoming more efficient in what it is that we're doing, and being more clear about how we do it sustainably, I think.
Yes, definitely. I totally agree with you. I think Brooklyn touched on that earlier on as well, in terms of what he's been doing with the time that he's been given under lockdown, and also with the Tomorrow Gallery. Brooklyn, would you like to share some of your methods around what you've been up to during this time in your planning, and also just moving from just exploring the digital interactive notion, but also just pouring some of the ideas that you probably had before into something else? Can you just share a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. I think what's been really important for me, and I think it's also kind of crucial to tomorrow's existence, is this idea of collaboration. And I speak about collaboration so often because no man is an island. And I definitely feel like a lot of the work that we kind of put together during the course of the lockdown has been because of the efforts of collaborative working. So what we did is we put out two virtual exhibitions using WebVR. And what we did is, or at least what we did curatorially, is work with a whole set of new artists that we hadn't had worked with before across the continent, to be honest. And what was really beautiful about that is that it was a way in which we could engage with artists that we normally wouldn't have had physical access to, and thinking about ways in which we can then communally put together a show and speak about a lot of the same kind of experiences that we're having, excuse me, during the lockdown. So a lot of the strategies that we thought about was just like, firstly, how do we put together an experience that is true to who tomorrow is, unique, engaging, that allows for some form of critical thinking, dialogue, etc., that exists outside of and no shame or shade to anyone who's putting on online exhibitions, but once again, our ideas were, we can't just be Tomorrow Gallery who works with all of this kind of technology and put together an Instagram exhibition. We need to find ways that when you're engaging with the work, you're still engaging with the idea of who we are at our core. And once again, it's also just this idea of when you come to the gallery space, you're having this experiential moment with the art. How then do we replicate that online? So the whole purpose of our projects were, you're at home, but we want you to feel as if you have time to really explore a lot of the exhibition materials in a way that's super interesting, in a way that allows for artists to show their work and to engage with their work with their other kind of audiences. So looking at artists who've never physically shown in a gallery space before, and now showing in a virtual gallery space, it's just like, wow, I have this, like, tomorrow showed my work. I now have this kind of repertoire as a whatever it might be to show my work. And another thing that's been really interesting is that the physical gallery space can often be a really hard space to engage with. With the one show that we did, Refiguring Space, it was about queer Black voices who are occupying space, and then realizing that when they come to the physical space, especially people of color often feel as if they don't belong. But now with like the internet, there is this kind of democratized space or landscape where anyone could engage with the work. They could be in their PJs, they could be drinking whatever they want to be, they could look however they want to be and not be afraid to engage with the art the same way they would be when they're going to the physical space. So what it's taught us is that art should be accessible, art should be equal, art should be free. There definitely is the challenges of data and internet and all of those things. So what we try to do is make it in a way in which you don't necessarily have to use your data every single time you experience the exhibition. You can download the exhibition onto your mobile device or onto your phone and have it forever thereafter, and not have to engage with, oh my gosh, Cole, how am I going to access this exhibition the next day or the day after? And once again, it's all about kind of like democratizing art for everyone, making it accessible for everyone, and still thinking about how we can meet our own mandate of making art equal, fair, and free to everyone.
Wow, thank you, Brooklyn. That was so concise and so conceptual at the same time. I think it's such an important time for just artists to think out of the box, if there is a box, but also just make sure that there's some form of compassion around accessibility. And what you've just put across to us is to
Hi everyone, I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she got.
I was just about to ask that too. I thought I was the only one.
Shame, I think the load shedding might be affecting.
Yeah, I think it's really bad.
Hi, everyone. So I think whilst we wait for Palesa to come back, and whilst we're dealing with the realities of load shedding in South Africa, which is actually a really hectic issue, maybe we can open this up to folks who are here. If you have a question that you'd like to pose, I know that Palesa had envisioned this as being really conversational and really an opportunity to engage with different people. So if there's questions that are coming up or something that's particularly resonating with anybody, maybe that's something in a moment to share. I'm really interested, Brooklyn, you mentioned a lot about democratizing space and democratizing art, right? And I think Advanza is one of the things that we really pride ourselves in, and it's an aspect of our work in terms of accessibility that we're really trying to get right, and it follows through in everything that we do, from our website to how we think about decentralization, which is a key aspect of our work. I'm wondering what space, how particularly sort of like commercial spaces engage with that, and in terms of how to democratize art while still being sustainable within themselves and maintaining their own values and integrity. I know that you've mentioned that tomorrow it's very much ingrained in how you work. But for other spaces, I'm wondering how that would work. And I'm wondering what that looks like within public space, and how to really ensure that we do create the kind of society where art is accessible to everybody. So, I mean, that was directly directed to Brooklyn specifically, but I think that anybody can take it, whoever's feeling the passion for it.
Sorry, I want to respond, but there's just a lot of background noise in my apartment because I think they're doing like construction or whatever. So I do apologize about that.
Oh, Belissa's back, so you can either respond or maybe Belissa can take it.
Yeah, I'll just wait for her to speak.
That's totally fine. Thank you so much for holding it down for me. Sorry, guys, I've got some load shedding issues in the background, but I'm back and I've reconnected again. I hope it won't happen again. Go ahead and I'd really like to hear your input. Brooklyn?
Hey.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying that you can carry on answering Refila's question.
Cool. I think it was really hard for me to hear her question just because I have like background noise here. They're just doing construction and it's really frustrating me. So I think it would be best if she could just ask the question again in the chat real quick and I'll respond.
Okay, awesome. I will definitely get to the chat box just towards the end of our discussion. But basically, I wanted to all as well. But moving on to Nonzokolo as well to find out what are the methods that she's been employing during this time, and make sure that they're
Hello.
make sure that there is some kind of collaboration that takes place. You can take over, Nonzokolo. Sorry, I've also got problems with the internet, but it's all sorted now.
I think for us has been, really identifying people that we can work with, and also identifying people who are already doing work and who, have the same vision as we do, and identifying different platforms as well to say that how do we also put ourselves in other people's spaces, and how do we also create the space for other people. And it has also just been, gathering everyone, especially keep emphasizing on community artists because I work with community artists, right? Especially community artists, just, being in one space to, where we can actually share information, we can actually talk. Like things such as creating a WhatsApp group where we can be able like share information there, and if anyone has anything that they're doing that they would like to feature, they will know that, like there is a database for artists here where they can be able to access each other. So that's just basically been it, being forming a form of database where we can be able to access each other and access each other's work. And through that, we can be able to collaborate and see if you like somebody's work and you like to work with them and so on. And that's just been the only way we have been able to, to connect together. It's just been together online. That's how we have, been trying to work. And yeah, that's just basically it, Balisa. I don't think there's any other way, because the situation and the reality is that now we are working online. And so how do we create a community online? So that's been our mission, to create a community where we can share information. on an online space.
Yeah, hey, I think one of the things that I think you have pointed out is the importance of connecting together, right? So making sure that there are necessary platforms where people can communicate together and also share ideas. I think it's so apt to even mention that, you know, even with the dynamic of operating within this specific industry and having to combine the online space and having to consider what is happening around us is such an important asset for us to take into consideration. I want to also to make us think about the ways in which we can actually utilize some of the skills that we already have outside of the arts. What does that look like for us? Because skills sharing seems to be something that is coming up a lot in the conversations that I certainly have come across. What are the skills that we can share in order to make sure that this industry or even the visual art space doesn't, you know, break apart, and make sure that we can really open up the industry, so to speak, in inverted commas, and also making sure that we can align with the right parties within the arts. So I think going forward, I'd like to also expand on that. And give it to Sarah to start off the answering.
Gosh, I mean, I think, one of the things I think that's probably been happening in other places in the world, and we are a little bit behind in, is operating in this online space and building communities in that way. I think we've been a little bit slow in that regard, and this has been great because it's kind of forced us a little bit to be better about it, and I don't know, to interact with people, especially across the continent. I mean, I've been having lots of conversations with people across the continent, which has been so incredibly awesome. And I think a lot of that opportunity provides a different way for doing skill sharing. But I guess, you know, there is something so physical and material about art that you can't kind of get away from, like being in a studio or doing a crit session with an artist in person. So I guess it depends on kind of what skills we're talking about, you know, if it's in the realm of professional practice. For us, we have something at August House called the Factor Sessions, which happens twice a month. It's a group of artists and free to the public, anyone can join. And they really talk about career development, professional practice, artistic practice, peer review, peer crit sessions. So we've been doing that for the last year and a bit. Obviously, it went online during lockdown, and I'm happy to share the details with anyone who would like to join. There are other sections in the industry that we are trying to support. So there would be like curatorial professional practice or writers' professional practice that we're looking into. And those are all designed around skill sharing programs, but very much kind of on the job, if you know what I mean, like hands-on, not academic and conversational, but really like, let's show how to do this particular thing in real life. So yeah, we've got a number of programs that run in that way, but they have been running for some time. The big difference has been that some of them have moved online in an attempt to cope with COVID. But I think most of them would like to move back offline. I think that this online fatigue thing is a very real problem. And as much as the online space is so awesome because you can go into the continent or you can work with people you've never met before or in different locations much more easily. I think there is something very strange about meeting people like this. I don't think it's a kind of natural thing. And certainly in the artistic space, I've found that there's been quite a lot of, you know, when you're critting somebody's work and you've never met somebody before, and there's a group of people on the screen, like it can open itself up to all kinds of disastrous disastrous effects, because people will say something and they can't judge body language and they can't judge tonality in the same kind of way. So yeah, I mean, I think it has its place, but I think for most of us, we're quite keen to get back to normal and maybe use the online platform as an addition on top of, as opposed to only.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. I think you're absolutely right. There's something strange about having an interface, a video interface to interact with people, whereas we actually are a community where we can rely on one another and share the necessary resources and skills. I think Refilwe had a question, and I just want to put off my screen and read it so that we all can see what she's written in the chat box. So she says, at Brooklyn and other panelists, Brooklyn mentioned democratizing art and making it accessible to all. I'm wondering what kind of models and ways of working could folks and organizations use to ensure art is accessible and also financially sustainable. So with that, I'd like Brooklyn to just quickly answer the question, and also I think to add on to that, because it probably will align with the question that Refilwe has, is in terms of democratization of art in the next 2 to 3 years, because obviously transitioning from out of lockdown, we know that the medical world talks about the pandemic being just over 2 to 3 years that we'll have a vaccine, and then we can go into the physical world. What does that look like as well from your perspective?
That's a really great question. I think I really can't speak for everyone. Once again, this is a very kind of singular perspective. But once again, tomorrow, the ways in which we hope to make art more accessible, not just to art audiences, but particularly to artists, is that we have an open door policy. So what that means is if you're working on a project, if you're conceptualizing a body of work, if you're wanting to work with technology that you've heard about or you've seen or you've wanted to explore, or you're wanting to expand your practice, then we are wholly welcome to that. Send me a mail, drop me not a WhatsApp, I'm not on WhatsApp, but like drop me a DM, hit me up, message us. It's really simple, and let's have a chat about how we can bring to life your projects. And then in terms of when it comes to audiences, what we continuously hope to do is engage with other organizations, hopefully the likes of August House and others. We've worked with the Soweto Theater, we've worked with organizations, the Electric South in Cape Town, and we constantly just wanting to show the work to other people and making sure that we get the work in the hands of the people who deserve to see it, especially when you're working with marginalized bodies, queer bodies, POC bodies. Their framework of what art is and what art can be is really just quite small. And what we hope to do is to show them that like art is anything. Art can be anything, whether it's using your mobile device to take photographs and share them online as a series of your day-to-day life, or whatever it might be. And that's what's really important to me, is to educate, but also integrate art within our communities, but also within the people who just walk out from the street and come into the space. I'm always open to having dialogue. I'm always open to just conversing. And I think that's another way in like a democracy. A democracy needs communication. It needs open dialogue. When we have all of these gatekeepers and we have these like boundaries and these barriers to entry, then like, what is the point? Do you know what I'm saying? So like, I think the way in which we hope to ensure that it's accessible is by making sure from the get-go that everything we do can actively be engaged with, can actively be accessed, can actively be in touch and in tune with what's happening in society. Financial sustainability is something that I really can't speak on because we're a non-for-profit and we have no money. So if anyone wants to invest in us, please do. But we're just about collaboration, creating, conversing. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We all need money. We all need bread on the table. I'm just wondering, just because of time and also the fact that I just want to squeeze in one more question and let the audience probably, Refile, can you help me just reading what people on Facebook have been asking? And then we can integrate that into our Q&A just before we land on something that would be viable for artists listening and also arts organizations, independent organizations, or even independent arts businesses. So one of the things that's so incredibly interesting with you, Brooklyn, that you've pointed out, and also aligns with what Sarah and Nontsokolo touched on earlier on, was the idea of access to art, right? And I've written here, art is a daily practice, which you've kind of wanted it to be opened up and democratized in a particular way. And I want to ask each panelist, unfortunately, Nontsokolo had to leave to prepare for the festival that you mentioned in the chat, is to find out, to wrap up all the discussions around putting bread on the table and how everybody can actually benefit from this. What are your definitions of collaboration and mutual benefit? Because I think every organization seeks different results or even different practices that would be, viable for everybody to take into consideration. So if you have any definitions, and by that I mean in terms of the modeling around collaboration and also mutually beneficial partnerships, because I think everybody has a way of interacting with potential partners, potential funders, and potential, people that might be acting as ambassadors for their businesses, or people that might even sit in different areas strategically to make sure that, platforms such as Meta Foundation and the Tomorrow Gallery are amplified. So I think maybe without being long-winded, because I can be, I'm asking just generally, what is it that you think could shape the art in terms of collaboration and your definition of that?
Yeah, of course. I guess that definition, as you said, is very kind of vast in its origin. But for me, I have two answers to that. The first one is who I represent, which is Tomorrow, and what collaboration looks like for us. As I said, it's this kind of idea that you have a project, you want to use our technology because we have the technology, very expensive technology that isn't easily obtainable as a kind of singular entity, as a singular artist. Our forms of collaboration are just like, hey, Brooklyn, Tomorrow, we would like to use this to make a body of work. Cool, come through, let's do the things. Or Brooklyn, we would like to work with you and your network in order to put together a project that we would like to show in your space. Please, by all means, let's do it. We offer you space, we offer you a little education as to how the technology works, and then we put it all into your hands. But lastly, what we do is we kind of are a guiding hand to help put the project together, from a marketing plan to social media strategy, what the show looks like, how it feels, as well as how to make the little elements come together. At the end of the day, it's your art, it's your ideas, it's your project. We just want to be there to work alongside you. But me, independently as a curator, collaboration looks to me the same way I would go to someone who would come to Tomorrow. Collaboration for me is, I'm interested in what does new media art look like in the global South, and how can we make that something that's very tangible, both within the continent, but also using the resources of the West and the East, because there's a lot to tap into. And I want to be able to collaborate with artists, both in the global south, but also institutions outside of that, to then bridge what we're actually doing and how we're making work that's prolific. We're making work that's all the time. If you think about these ideas of technology, these things come from Africa. Like, you can't deny that. And now we're engaging in all of these other spaces and just being like, but yeah, Africa is behind, or Africa is whatever bullshit story you're going to tell me. Like, I can't deal with it. It's just like, yo, these are the ways in which we're using technology, ancestral technology, technology of culture, technology of being, and we're using that and we're reshaping it and we're reforming it. And just because we might not have the capital wealth that's been stolen from us to make these things look pretty, we will still make them, and we will show it to you the way it should be seen. So yeah, collaboration is about, for me, it's about how can I engage with someone else or something else to make something come to life, or even with tomorrow to kind of visualize and conceptualize a project and think about what it could be like and how it could be brought to life.
Definitely. Sarah, do you have any inputs to the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Meta Foundation, I guess, is a kind of make the circle bigger organization. Like, our intersection exists in three parts. We are interested in the artist, the artwork, and the audience. And that's super broad, but it's super broad for a reason. And that's because, a bit like Brooklyn, I just want to work on really interesting, cool projects that other people want to work on, and I want to make it happen. So we've kind of kept it as open as possible. And we are collaborating with individuals and organizations and really just trying to do things that are visionary, on the edge of trying to pick our way through to what we think the future looks like. I guess that one of the things I kind of hope for out of collaboration is that we become a little bit more independent, because certainly what this whole pandemic has revealed is that we are very dependent, whether it's on each other or government or the system, whatever that is, operating in a certain way. And that makes us very vulnerable. So I am interested in trying to find ways of collaboration that are maybe not only monetary based or not only project based, but kind of look to the future to sustain us better as an industry, that artists, curators, writers, whatever, aren't left out in the cold when something goes wrong. Because this is not the last time this is going to happen to us. Like, this is the beginning of what we can anticipate as we take over more of the planet and, you know, whatever. So, I mean, I think, like, there's some very real basic things that we need to think about, like, I don't know, unemployment insurance, like retirement stuff, you know, like some of those basic kind of societal things that we need to get better about, all the way through to being less siloed in our little gallery or thing, or so protectionistic about who we are and it's Sarah's project or it's this company or that, you know, like we will only survive if we collaborate. Unlike Brooklyn, I don't really have like a strict set of what projects exactly those are. Like, mostly people, I have conversations with people, and if it sounds like something that I may be able to have some resources to do, then I'm there like a bear. If I can't do it, then I hopefully will be able to refer you to somebody who can through my network, because I like to think about myself as being helpful. So I may not be able to help you, but maybe a friend of mine, like, here's Brooklyn, he might be able to help you, you know, and try and support each other in that way. Like, making the circle bigger is about looking after each other and not trying to grab your piece of the pie solely for yourself. Understanding that it'll come back to you in some other way roundabout later. I hope that answers the question.
Perfectly. Avanza team has just indicated that we don't have any questions on Facebook. and we can transition to opening it up and making the circle bigger, as you said, to some of the people on the Zoom meeting or present in the Zoom meeting. So if anybody would like to speak about their experiences and how they've fared during the lockdown, but also transitioning into the lockdown, what they have been doing within their own spaces. So I'm going to mute my mic and hopefully somebody will join us. Please let the Vanza team raise your hand if you'd like to say something as well.
Hello. Am I audible? Sorry, I'm just taking a deep.
Welcome,
jumping straight ahead of the line. My name is Thato Mokhodzi, and I'm an independent curator in Johannesburg. And I'm quite interested in this conversation, given how a lot of our ideas, as has been mentioned by several of the panelists, around professional practices, artists, and people working in the creative spheres, has shifted because of the limitations of access to audience and access to certain technologies that we're now forced to work with. In that sense, I'm quite curious about us thinking through the idea of technologies, as Brooklyn began to talk about, as technology being a multifaceted thing, that it's not really about brick and mortar so much as it is about a kind of a way of life, and thinking through what different ways of being we can begin to integrate into our new reality. And where do we find examples of this? I think there are there's an existing vocabulary within the online space about how you talk about technology and the arts, right? Like, so there's, for instance, I'm thinking about the idea of crowdfunding and these various platforms that you get where you can source funding from a community, and it's sort of voluntary how much you contribute, and as long as there's a defined outcome, be it collective or otherwise, there is a kind of coming together to share resources and give of ourselves to each other's practices. So as a form of collaboration, there's that as well. But I'm also interested in the idea of commoning. So how do we think of the physical spaces that artists occupy, like the studios at August House, as an opportunity to common or commune, and integrate that into ideas like group funding? So for instance, in South Africa, we talk about the tradition of stokvels, right, which is a form of group funding. How do we then sort of kind of think from various positionalities? So for those who struggle with internet access and online access, how can artists sort of facilitate ways of collaborating that are not entirely reliant on one form of technology, but are integrating multiple ways of being, ways of communing, ways of collectively experiencing each other's work and supporting each other's work? Thank you.
Wow, that's really incredible. Thank you, Thato, for sharing, and also just making sure that you are just putting it out there. You know, we need the community to survive. And I'd just like to, wrap up with that question to the panelists that have joined us, Sarah and Brooklyn. Can you just share what your thoughts are around the comments that Thato has shared with us? I'll start with Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Thato, for that awesome question. I really have been interested in this idea of how we better support ourselves independently. And in fact, I did quite a lot of research on stokvels and or those kinds of models for things, had long conversations with Refilwe about possibilities of how we could do stuff. I then went to the artists, and there's this kind of funny thing about artists that I don't always really understand, and I guess it's because of the precarious nature within which they live. But when you start to talk to people about ongoing payments, monthly like things, people panic and the conversation kind of comes to an end. It is still something I'm really interested in, but you need like a minimum amount of people to make a stokvel a reasonable endeavor. And I really do want to keep pushing to see if I can pull something off just in our little microcosm at August House. If I got it to be bigger and more awesome, that would be great. So I think that there are ways like that, or versions of that kind of thing, that we certainly can pull off. And I think there is an immediacy for us to be trying to engage on that level. Interestingly enough, I've had a number of conversations over the last weeks, and I guess it's a function of being online as well, but I've had a number of conversations about people using technology that's not online. So trying to find ways to provide portions of technology that then are outside of the kind of digital requirements, or the digital online environment runs alongside and is not the only thing that you're doing. Which is so, on so many levels, it's completely obvious. And I think it also goes back to this fatigue thing, like people are hankering for doing stuff that isn't on Zoom necessarily. So I am very interested in trying to explore that around some site-specific work, potentially at August House, if we can find the money, which is like more manual, more old-fashioned kind of things that people can participate in just by showing up. But I guess there's no one solve to all of the questions you've asked. I think it's about us interrogating our projects in different kinds of ways and trying to really be sensitive and aware of where people exist in the world, whether that is physically they can't get from one space to another, or digitally they can't because they don't have access to data or computers or whatever the issue is, and trying to really be mitigate to support those people and not exclude them because we haven't considered them. And I really feel like it's a new level for us now in COVID that we need to be cognizant of. I don't know if that answers your question, but there you go.
That answers my question perfectly, Sarah. And I don't know if Tata is also listening in as well. I had to move because to a charge point, but she says thank you. Oh, it's Refilwe. Refilwe says thank you to the inputs that we've provided, but I would just want to, so that we can know what Brooklyn has been experiencing, can we move on to Brooklyn and he can tell us more so that we can wrap up our short little meeting today?
Cool. Yeah, I think Sarah really answered that in a way that I could not have. But like, I think for me, definitely, even just engaging in technology, my realities, I can't just stand here and honestly speak about everyone's realities. My realities is that I was brought up on the internet. So my engagement with technology and community is completely different to someone who this is a foreign world to. And I think it's important to also mention the communities that are online who exist outside of like your traditional form of community. And I speak about this quite regularly, even in the exhibition that we did, Coexistence, is that now with the fact that COVID-19's happened, we're seeing traditional commercial gallery spaces move online and now just be like, hey, we're on this thing called the internet, when there was a big community who's always been there before, and often were just not, they were silent or they weren't heard from. And we were doing very important work to make the internet much more safer for people to access it. And I can just think about so many things like the blockchain, like Reddit and 4chan forums. Like there are so many communities for artists that exist outside of Facebook and Google. that we've put together that are decentralized. There's a big project that we're working on called Mycelium, which is a project that we've been working on for close to 5 years. That's a decentralized social network for community where marginalized communities can come together and they can speak openly. They don't have to worry about any kind of political bias. They don't need to worry about any form of advertising. Everyone's responsible for what everyone says. It's an open ledger. Everyone is looking at how we then engage with each other. And I think these ideas are now kind of, to me, mimicking themselves within artist communities, where artists are just like, we're working with cryptocurrency to sell our art amongst each other, and also understand who owns our art, how the art's being transported. So I think what's happened and what I've seen often, especially with like artists from the Global South, is that they don't know where their art is. And what happens is that they don't have any form of agency over the value of what their work is. And then this goes back to ideas of funding, of paying yourself what you're worth, of making it from day to day, is that when you have these communities where there's this kind of transparency about your work, and you also know where it is, when it was created, who has it, how it's been viewed and seen, that then allows you more power with the work that you're creating, so that you're not kind of living from day to day, but the work that you're making every single day kind of has its own weight and its own value over the course of your whole life. And that just gives you more empowerment, as opposed to just selling a work or working on this project today and not having kind of a sustainable kind of income generation, but also just working towards making being an artist a practical thing. Because at the end of the day, this is something that we put our whole lives into. There's no like corporate paycheck at the end of the month. Like what we're doing every day is just like, putting these projects together. So I guess those are my brief comments.
Thank you so much, Brooklyn. Thank you so much, Sarah. With that, I think we might even want to have a second opinion, a second discussion, and just proving that this is so much more than just one discussion, and hopefully one discussion at a time amongst ourselves, in between ourselves. It would definitely make sure that we get into a specific space of really just honing in on collaboration, honing in on skills sharing, honing in on democratizing art, and also honing in on just the daily practice of art making on a practical level and how that plays out into the real world. So with that, I think we're going to disappear. Tata Mokgotsi sends her love and thanks for everything that you have contributed as well. And all the people that have tuned in on Facebook, thank you for joining us. You could be anywhere in the world, but you chose to be here with us. Sarah, well done on Meta Foundation and wish you all the best. Brooklyn, well done on Tomorrow Gallery and we wish you all the best with your projects. And to the Vanza team, thank you so much for allowing us to discuss this very important topic. I hope that we will grow from strength to strength. And as a co-collaborator on this talk, thank you for your patience with the internet outage, and thank you for holding me down and participating so well. I think we can disappear, everyone. Cheers. Bye.